Thanks for joining us tonight. My name is Liza Urick, and I teach the Art Now class. Again, thanks so much for joining us. We're really excited for this talk. We're co-hosting it with Forest City Gallery and the Office of Indigenous Initiatives. I'd like to first begin by acknowledging that Western University is located on the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Lenape, and Oneida Nations on lands connected with the London Township and Sombre Treaties of 1796 and the Dish with One Spoon Covenant Wampum. This land continues to be home to diverse Indigenous peoples, First Nations, Métis, and Inuit, whom we recognize as contemporary stewards of the land and vital contributors of our society. As a settler and educator, I'm committed to fostering an inclusive and respectful learning environment that promotes understanding and awareness. This acknowledgement is part of an ongoing process rooted in sustained community engagement, advocacy, and continued learning. Tonight's talk is part of Towards Braiding, an interactive exhibition and conversation series at Forest City Gallery. Organized by Sarah May Chitty, it invites Londoners to reflect on their roles and responsibilities as treaties people and asks that we collectively dream of anti-colonial futures. Sarah May Chitty is Curriculum and Pedagogy Advisor with the Office of Indigenous Initiatives, and I just want to turn it over now to talk a little bit more about the programming there.
Me, goetch, Liza. Hello, everyone. Wasazo Nankwe Kanien'kehá, Sarah May Indigo, that's my English name. Nagikin Dodam, Michasaki Kahnawake Kwendao, Dushkan Zibing, Minwa, Alderville, and Donjaba, Shaganashin, and Noasam. So I just told you that I'm a member of Alderville First Nation. I'm Otter Clan, and my dad is a third-generation British white settler. I also said Dushkan Zibing in Donjaba because I grew up just outside of London, in Elgin County area, in close proximity to the river, and want to speak to my relationship to the river when I introduce myself to you. It is really exciting to have someone like Leith as our second Indigenous Artist-in-Residence here at Western. So in my work at the Office of Indigenous Initiatives, we have been really fortunate to collaborate with visual arts in having this amazing opportunity. And it started with Kelly Green last year. And then how Forest City Gallery kind of fits in is I also sit on the board of Forest City Gallery, which is an artist-run center here in London, actually coming up on our 50-year anniversary that we're celebrating on the 14th of October. So if you can't make it to the exhibit, which is there until October 13th, come celebrate 50 years with us on the 14th. And Towards Braiding, especially in an arts, so it is a text by Vanessa Andreotti and Elwood Jimmy and Sharon Stein. And it's a collaborative work where they essentially look at when institutions, such as arts institutions like museums, galleries, want to hire Indigenous people to create change, decolonize, indigenize, some of the things that kind of, some of the missteps that come about, some of the important things that we have to remember together and think about together in order to do important work together and work towards this concept of braiding. So the exhibit at Forest City Gallery is essentially pulling threads from that text to invite folks to go beyond the text, beyond the reading. And it came out of conversations with Forest City Gallery Board about what it means to decolonize. Can we even decolonize? What would that look like? How can we as a board just determine that we're decolonizing without community engagement, without inviting community into our space to imagine what decolonizing could even look like on our actual gallery walls? So if you go, come participate, make some contributions. And then especially important is to think about how we sort of put Indigenous arts practices into boxes. For a really long time, beading was thought of as a craft, like just, but as you're gonna hear from Leith's incredible story, it's so much more than that. And it's certainly important to consider how we sort of define Indigenous art and how we kind of put people into boxes in that regard. So I'm really excited to hear Leith today. And I'm going to pass it back over to Liza to introduce Leith.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you so much, Sarah. So it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker tonight, Leith Mahkewa. Leith is a member of the Oneida Nation of the Thames. She's a beadwork artist and currently the Indigenous Artist-in-Residence for the Department of Visual Arts. Her art has its foundation in mentorship, friendship, and family. She'll speak about how these elements influenced and fostered her beadwork style and how she made her way to where she is now. So please join me in welcoming Leith.
I gotta set up first, make sure I'm on the mic. Okay. I'm a little bit nervous, everybody, so just bear with me. This is my first artist talk. Normally, I just do informal talking, one-on-one question and answer kind of style. So this is a big jump for me right now. So just bear with me. So, Jajaran Dakwa, the Wanzoni, Aguhrori, the Watkunuaradugi, the Gan was a Wajat the Roru, Wagatsanuni, the Gan is a West, and Dini's a Wajus, a Wadaroru, Garaduntani, Unjats, Oneida ni the Wagenu, Wagatahuni, ni Wagit the Roda, Danu Nekne, Wagadun Harde, the Nua Wasundade, Aumdu, Agutarhase, ni Giga, Nohoda, Dakti Nehteraru, ne Giga, Rudinushuni, Auriwage. So I just introduced myself. I will be speaking off and on in Kanien'kehá, which is the Mohawk language. Sometimes I won't directly translate what it is I'm saying because I'm also speaking to the people who might be watching who are Oneida speakers. So my name is Leith Mahkewa. Oops. Is it okay? So my name is Leith Mahkewa, and I am a raised beadwork artist. And if anybody doesn't necessarily know what raised beadwork is, it's kind of a three-dimensional kind of work. So when you would normally touch beadwork, sometimes it's just flat work, but this is bumpy and raised, and it'll be up here in front. So if after someone wants to touch to see what it looks like or what it feels like, I'll just give a brief description of this piece because I think it's kind of encompassing of what my talk is going to be. During the pandemic, there was a lady from Kahnawake. Her name was Jessica Hernandez, and she has a store called Niece's Accessories. And what she did during the pandemic is she created opportunities for people to engage with one another, not necessarily in person, but working on all similar projects. So once a month, I think it was, she had projects that she would post online, or you could pick up the patterns and whatnot. And so this is her first design that she made, and it was so it's like a beadwork challenge, a community beadwork challenge, and on the top here it says community. So this is her design, and what I did is because of course at that time it was very challenging. So what I did is I beaded this backwards. So the design was on the back because that's normally how I bead, and so I just picked up the beads, followed the design on the back, touched and felt my way around, hoping that everything would be fine, not knowing necessarily, trying to keep track of like, okay, it's 3 clear beads and one solid white bead, and doing it that way and never looking at it. Aside from doing a video where I was like this talking to Instagram or some social media and everybody else could see but not me. And then at the end, I just turned it around and I filmed my reaction to what it was that was on this side. And it turned out pretty good, I thought. There are some like very loose threads and some really loose beads, and I like my beads to be tight, really, really tight. So that'll be up front for everybody to see if they choose to later on. So I just thought I'd break the ice with that because I really like beadwork, and it's a fundamental part of my life right now. So hopefully you all will take away a little bit of something, and that maybe you can relate to your own beadwork, your own artwork and whatever style that is. So, and if it seems like I'm talking towards this side, it's just because I was asked to use this side of the projector, but there's that. So my talk is a beadworks perspective, family, friendship, and mentorship, and that's really the foundation of everything that I've done in terms of my artwork. And so let's begin on this journey. So this is my family. Ne akwadere, ne jaganidiru garhoane, danu keawagua, adewanarda, yagudhusrat, lenusizas, danu agetnizokwa. So that is my youngest one. And I pointed out him because a lot of the momentum to where I am today started just before his birth. Now, I had a family, and my first 3 children were all very close in age, and it was a little bit difficult for me to really focus on my craft. And I think like even nowadays, we're all in school, you're all in school, busy, maybe some of you have families or other responsibilities that you have to take care of, and sometimes you can't focus necessarily on your art. It's coming. You'll have that time, it is coming. And then I have a picture of my kids when they were smaller, just because I miss them. I don't currently live at home right now. I am going back to my home tomorrow morning, so that's good. I'll be able to see them. I haven't seen them for about 2 weeks, so there's my family. And really, my beadwork started when my oldest, right there, Donarda, was a baby, because when we go to the Haudenosaunee, when we go to the longhouse and we have ceremony, everyone wears their traditional dress. People might call it regalia. We just call it our best clothing. And I really wanted to make sure that my children had their best clothing, and that's really kind of how it started, my real honing in on what it is that I wanted to do. So when I refer to our best clothing, here are some of the examples. Like here is my husband and I on our wedding day, and I created this outfit. Some of the pieces, like the pants my husband's wearing, and the actual calico dress wasn't made by myself, but the rest was. And then this was the first set that I made for my second son, and then subsequently my other son wore it after him. And then this is the latest piece that I made, which entirely beaded and crafted by myself. It was my daughter's graduation this spring. And I really think it's important for myself just to show like my appreciation for them, and really how proud I am of what it is they're doing by making sure that they are well dressed in that regard, and they can wear it when they go wear it interchangeably with other pieces, or just whatever it is that they want to do. And this is one of the first. This piece here is a medicine bag that I made for my son right here when he was 1 year old and I was learning language. And that's a really significant piece for me, just because it really kind of started my love of the flat work that you see here in this picture here, that's also mimicked here, and then also on the dress here. It's not raised at all. So it's all stitched with one needle and one thread. This is my mother and my father, where everything began. And my mother is Jessica Hill. She's in the audience in the back row with the leopard shirt on. She is from Oneida also, and her mother is from Saugeen, Chippewa, Ojibwe. And that is my father, Don Mahkewa Jr., and he is Hopi and Tewa. And the piece you see on the right-hand side there is a pair of moccasins that I made 2 years ago. And what I did is I've tried to not necessarily focus on just raised beadwork, but also try to incorporate more of my father's family and Hopi Tewa, and he comes from a long line of potters, and I wanted to try to implement that into my beadwork. So I did the line work here, you'll see here, and I tried to make it look like a mesa, like under the moon and the sun, and there's two people there. I always try to incorporate people into my work if I can, and I always like to use small beads when I'm doing that. But then here too, you'll see there's like corn, as if it was in the desert, the corn, and all you see is stars. So that's another way that I try to honor him and his family. And then I have here the very, very colorful raised beadwork that you would see here around on southwestern Ontario, or in the woodlands area, all that brightness that you would see. So that is my homage to them both. And that was a winning piece at the Santa Fe Indian Market 2022. Yeah, so that was that. Here is my grandmother. Here's my grandma. Her name is, I'm gonna get a little teary-eyed. I might cry during this presentation because this is very, very about me. So this is my grandmother, Beatrice Madwash Wellington, and this is her pictured here at the Mount Elgin Institute Residential School in Muncie, which is about maybe 35 minutes away from London. This is 1993. She was a student there for most of her adolescence until she left, I believe, when she was 18 years old, probably, which would be the normal time that students would be allowed to leave. And there she is pictured, and then on the left, and there she is pictured on the right, more how I remember her. She was of small stature, but she had so much wisdom and knew how to do anything and anything that you can imagine. A long time ago, but when students were studying, you don't want to say that, were at the residential school, a lot of their time was devoted to making sure that they were able to take care of houses and do handiwork and do all those things that lesser class people would be doing. And she knew how to do everything with the utmost integrity, making sure her family was fed, making sure her family was clothed, working outside of the home, making sure her grandchildren were loved. And I really I really take a lot of her resilience for the preciseness of what she did and how she lived her life in terms of her handiwork and just in general. I owe a debt of gratitude, and she's really someone who really helped me get on the track to doing things with my hands in terms of like buying embroidery kit or doing things like that, or showing me how to sew and just things like that. I'm sure many of you have relatives or people close to you in your life who have done those kind of things, maybe not necessarily in terms of like showing you how to sew, or maybe teaching you how to cook, or doing those things that you might not necessarily see right now as pivotal moments, but they are later on. Sometimes they come back and you're like, oh my goodness, I remember that. So kind of try to treasure that and try to see where that takes you. This is my father's grandmother, and her name is Grace Chapela. She is a Tewa famous potter. Her pottery would have been classified as Hopi Tewa. She lived in the Hopi village, First Mesa, and I didn't know her at all. I didn't know my father's family very much, not at all actually, but that didn't stop me, and it's kind of propelled me into a direction that I never thought my beadwork or my art craft would really come to life. And so this is her pottery here. And what you'll see is this is her signature, the butterfly or moth. And a lot of her beadwork and a lot of her family who have continued to do pottery have implemented that kind of motif onto their pottery. So it really recognizes who is the family that they come from. And you'll see here on this bag where I pay homage to her and Hopi Tewa people is right here. Is I also beaded a moth or butterfly motif in a very different, in a little bit of a different way. She has like 2 notches there, and my notches are on the bottom. Just because I didn't necessarily want to mimic exactly what it was, but I think integrity comes when you ask family or those who that belongs to, is it okay? That's my family, but I still had to ask my father and his brothers and sisters if that was okay for me to add. Just because you don't want to appropriate anything, you want to make sure that you give recognition and whatnot to those who are inspiring you or who you choose to honor. So you'll see here that there is almost like a W here. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to try to mimic some of the movement of Hopi pottery, because there's a lot of sharp edges sometimes in the pottery. And then I did some raised beadwork here on this side. Now this is very different compared to this side, and this is more of the Haudenosaunee raised beadwork type, very vibrant colors, raised beadwork. But I also tried to add like a mesa, and again, you see the people in those little spots there, and there's 2 people here. And this is like creation, Haudenosaunee creation, where the tree of life comes and the vibrancy. And then in the Hopi creation story, when they came from the ground, so those are the people coming up. So I tried to really elevate myself and try to challenge myself to do something that wasn't just necessarily the norm that I would have normally done. And then these moccasins here are a direct homage to my grandmother. I took basically the colors that I saw in her pots and I created that into a pair of moccasins that got honorable mention at the Heard Museum. So there's that. This is my mother. And my mother was very pivotal, not necessarily just in my life, but in helping to awaken, to help with the resurgence of beadwork within the community of Kahnawake. That's what I think, and I know it to be true. What she did in 1998 and 1999 is she opened a bead store, and her love for beads, really brought community together, and the community consists of the ladies in the pictures. Some of the people are duplicated in one, and I added the second picture because some people weren't present in the first picture, so I wanted to make sure I had the majority of them in both pictures so I could just recognize we call ourselves the bead babes. And so it was a group of women who really came together, one, for their love of beadwork, two, as a place to create community. A lot of the women had younger children at the time, and they wanted to learn how to do something, our beadwork. So, or Mohawk style beadwork and Kanien'kehá style beadwork. And so that's what they did. And we've been beading for 24 years together as a group. We don't often get together as maybe we did in the beginning, just because life changes and things happen. But we recently, 2 weeks ago, took a trip to Salamanca for a beadwork conference, and so we got together, and they're subsequently meeting again now that, now we're getting back to regular times. The moccasin there is one of my first moccasins that I made, and that was my mother's moccasin. So that's her foot there wearing her moccasin. So you see a little bit of the raised beadwork here. In the flower, I didn't really necessarily like to go high in the raised beadwork. And you see my rope stitch is really wonky, not straight at all, very, but that's the first one. It gets better as it goes on. This is my first actual thing that I beaded that had raised beadwork. Here, the corn is raised, and I had a mentor, Robin Delarone, who was pictured in one of the previous pictures. She really helped me to be comfortable with getting that raised bump, that 3D effect. Normally, I would just do the flat work like is there in the Hopi sun. I have not finished this piece. It's a crown. I wasn't really into crowns back in 2000. That's when that was very popular. Myself, I don't really care for them, but I have it still, and I just always think, well, maybe I could make it to something else, but right now it'll stay what it is. Here is my greatest mentor, the late Gail Albany Montour, Garnat Dunta. I used to go by Garnat Dunta too, until I found out my name was Garnat Dunta. But so that is Garnat Dunta, that's Gail. And she was the pillar of our group. She was the master beadworker. And when people call me that, I always think of her. So I don't ever think I'll measure up, because she really was the salt of the earth, kind, wonderful laugh, willing to share, willing to just have funny stories, let you into her life. She was wonderful. And here on the left, you can see this is her beaded frame. And she really came from a line of beaders prior, whereas myself, I had no one doing beadwork in my family at all. Other handicrafts, yes, but beadwork, no. And that is really Mohawk style raised beadwork right there. And for many years, I tried to get this kind of stitching you'll see here on the edge, just precise. And I got it right there. Gail was really patient with me, and she tried to give me tips on how to do it. And every time I did it, I always thought, okay, how did she say to start again? Finally, I remembered. Finally, I had it. And so this is a piece, the red piece that I did. It was used as a raffle during the pandemic. People were buying raffles and all the time. So I made this piece, and I raffled it off. But I really, that's the one piece I really think Gail would be proud of, because I really like it, and it's very Mohawk style raised beadwork, how it looks, aside from the coloring, because normally it's not red, it's all colors and beautiful. So that's Gail. This is another bead group that I had, or have, I should say, and they're actually meeting. Today is Wednesday, so they're not meeting today. They met last night. And this group of ladies, my friend here in the Santa hat, Trudy Thomas, she was also learning how to do beadwork. She was doing small beaded birds with her great aunt. And one night we went to Gail's together. She had invited me to go there with her at the time, and we were talking, and she wanted to put a bead group together, and so she asked a bunch of ladies if they wanted to get together, and we started another bead group, which ran on a different night than the Bead Babes, because these are the Beading Biddies. So this is the Beading Biddies, and currently there is Anna Mae, which is pictured here, and her daughter Amy, and Amy's daughter Dade, and Anna Mae's great-granddaughter sometimes go to beadwork. So that's 4 generations. Now, that is kind of impressive to have in one room doing the same thing, doing what a long time ago people would do, would have their children, their grandchildren, women would gather together and do beadwork. Sometimes they would do it in different sequences. Somebody would do maybe the edging and somebody would fill in a flower or whatnot, or women would just get together and that was part of their economy, was to do the beadwork and they would sell it. So it's really nice to see that there. When we get all together and we're laughing, telling stories. Some people are eating snacks more than they're doing the beadwork, but that's okay because we're all getting together and everyone contributes. And so all of the moccasins there on that side are all moccasins I did while I was with the bead group, with this bead group. So I just wanted to share that because I didn't have any other photos that really maybe amplify just how fun the bead group is. And it's a really nice group of women, and I'm sure anyone who gets together with friends and has a good time doing whatever it is, playing video games or stuff, whatever it is that you choose to do when you get together, it's really fun. So that's really another small community. This is one of the pivotal parts of my jumping off into doing different things and really challenging myself. This outfit was the first outfit that I was actually commissioned to do. There's a pair of moccasins that go with it, but I don't have them pictured. But the client who had commissioned me to do the work really wanted, this is what she said. And I laughed at the time, but it's very telling of what you can do if you let your imagination and your creativity run. We had a meeting in her house, in her kitchen, and she says, I want those greens. And I was like, what greens are you talking about? The greens outside my window. That is what I want. I want those greens. I want that bright one. I want this muted one. I want, and I thought, oh my God, how am I going to do this? How am I going to articulate what it is she wants? And she loved it, and her daughter loved it. And there are, I think, maybe 32 different types of colored beads in that one outfit here. And she wanted strawberries and different things. And normally I would do more flowers that are like real flower colors. I hate to say real flower colors, but the typical pink, purple, all those other kind of colors. But I really wanted to make it more mature than it was just like not whimsical, just, I don't know what the word is. I really wanted to make it so that it would be a piece that she could wear if she was 18 or if she was 50. So it was a mature piece, something that could live and really grow with the wearer. And subsequently, she lends it out to other people, and they were able to wear it too. So it's really had, it took a life of its own. And after that piece outfit, I took a leap. And I took a leap only because I had mentors like Carla Hemlock and Babe Hemlock, who are world-renowned. Carla's a world-renowned textile artist. She does a lot of quilting along with beaded adornment. And Babe does wood carving and cradle boards. And they really helped me to take a chance and try to go, along with Gail Montour, who was originally went to the Heard Museum, but they said, you know, you should try to go to a show. Go to a show and see what happens. And they really helped me to, you know, raise my confidence and really take that leap, because it's a hard thing when you want to go outside of what it is you normally do. And a lot of times we're worried about the critique of somebody else. And we're worried like, oh, well, if I want to make something and I want to sell it, well, I got to think of this, and that. No, you don't. You have to think about what it is that you like, and somebody will like it. You don't have to make it for the trend. Because often if you're making for the trend, it doesn't last. And who wants to work on something that you think like, oh God, I got to work on this color because I know that somebody might buy this. And no, because then it brings you down. You want to have things that really liven you up and really that you are passionate about. And so what I did here is I really incorporated small beads in that whole bandolier bag. Small beads like size 24. And the higher the number, the smaller the bead. So 24 is like the tip of a pin, the pointy part, not the top of the pin, the pointy part. So yeah, so that's really the small beads that I was working with. And as luck would have it, I entered my first show, the Heard Museum, and I got best of class and I got best of division. So that was really the catapult, like the first thing I ever made, and I entered and I placed in a ribbon. And my son, I gifted that to him. That didn't sell. And that's one of the things too, is like sometimes you're holding on to things and waiting for things to sell and you think no one's gonna buy this. Sometimes they sell and sometimes they don't. Luckily, that was a piece that I didn't mind having around. Usually, I don't like to have any of my art around. When I'm done, I want it out. I want it to be sold to somebody. I don't like to hold on to a lot of stuff just because a lot of times as artists, you think, you know, I could do better. Maybe I'll just tweak this. Maybe I'll take, and it just never ends. It never ends. So sometimes you just have to put it to rest and really let it go. So I'm glad that that stayed around. This is a story. This is a story. So I put this vamp was original here, minus this flower. I had these 2 strawberries. I had 2 vamps. Here there's only pictured the original one. I had 2 vamps. And I put this up here because I want to show you that sometimes life is hectic. Sometimes you start a project and you can't necessarily finish it right away. But you put it on the side. You put it on the side and you wait for that opportunity. Maybe the iron will strike in 2 weeks. Maybe it never strikes. I had this piece, and this really was part of the fire or the start of what it was, that big, that outfit with the accessories with the strawberries. This is where it started. It started with these strawberries, but it was brown. I didn't really want to use brown. So I had put these 2 vamps on the side, waited. One day I found one of the vamps. I said, hey, where's that other vamp? I can't find it. Oh, look for it, look for it. Then I put the vamp just on the side there, thinking, okay, when the other vamp comes, I'm going to finish this pair of moccasins. Never found it. What I did, though, I don't know how it came about, but I had a cousin who's very resilient, very dedicated to family, very dedicated to teaching students and making them part of making them a part of her family. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to make her a vamp. Circumstances in life change us, right? And one of her circumstances was her leg was amputated. And so she only needed 1 vamp. And I thought, you know what? I only have this vamp, and this is number 2. I only had the number 1. I only had this little strawberry. I'm going to make her a vamp. So I beaded the vamp. I made her a moccasin. I gifted to her. It all worked out. I was like, oh my God, that is what it was for. Wouldn't you know, a year and a half later, I found that one. I found that one minus the flower. And I thought, wow, of all the things, like, what am I going to do with this 1 vamp? Another woman who was dedicated to family, held a position within Longhouse, worked hard for her family and was resilient and was the epitome of what was good. She also had her leg amputated. What I did is I created this for her, and I gifted her that one. So things have a purpose. Sometimes you can't see it right away. Sometimes it's the oh, I can't find it. Oh, I threw this paint on this thing and it doesn't work. It might work. Sometimes just let it flow. Sometimes you just got to put it to rest and it works its way out. So this is, I tried to, of course, use the same kind of colors a little bit just so they kind of had a little bit of similarity. But other than that, so those are that. So I want to tell you that little story. This is another group of women. These are my children here, first of all. And why I put my children next to these women is because my husband and I made a commitment when my oldest son was born. Well, my husband made a commitment that when my oldest son was born that he was going to only speak to him in Kanien'kehá, in the Mohawk language. And it's either jump on board or just be the one who's not involved at all. And so I also dedicated, after like the last 21 years, really of learning Kanien'kehá, and I was able to study for 3 years. The 1 year after when my son was 1 year old at the Kanien'kehá, the Kanien'kehá Diwananirat's Dindaristaqua at the Kanien'kehá Ngwanarau Dijokwa Cultural Center in Kahnawake, and it's an adult immersion program. I say the best program within Haudenosaunee country, and in terms of the acquisition of language and proficiency that the people come out of here. All of us here are graduates of that program. And so our family made that commitment to raise our children as first language speakers. And I put them up there, and I put these ladies up here, and I'll talk about them in a minute. But for myself, when I knew language, when I learned language and I could speak to all those things that speak Kanien'kehá or know Kanien'kehá, all those natural things. Things look brighter. The earth came alive. You know, you look down and you see the grass, and I could see little ants all over the place. And I was like, oh my goodness. And I remember telling my husband that, I'm like, man, things have changed. I am evolving. And I'm actually wearing the same thing I'm wearing in that picture. Funny enough. When it's not broken, don't fix it, right? So these ladies are also ladies, like I said, who graduated from the Kanien'kehá Haudenosaunee program. And they are pillars and my support system. And we all have been striving to teach our children to be first language speakers. And we go and we've spoken at other language conferences, and they're just foundation and family who aren't family but will always be family. And I just wanted to acknowledge them because they are some of the women who also wear the beautiful dress when they go to ceremony. And I just wanted to put them up there because they deserve acknowledgement too, because they're a big part of all of this beadwork journey. Okay, so I had talked about that bandolier bag. And that bandolier bag was the beginning of what would be my art, what I would say, I'm an artist now. When I got that ribbon, I thought, you know what, I'm going places, you know? Maybe this is something that I can do. Maybe I can challenge myself more for what I want rather than what is commissioned and see what happens. So the year after I had entered that bandolier bag, I think this was 2014 when I started this, I started this vase. It was a 6-sided vase to begin with, a much larger size. Again, I used very, 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 very small beads. Some people thought this was embroidery. It's really all small 24 beads. And when I began to start using the small beads, I realized I can't use this 6-sided figure vase because it was too big. I had to make it smaller. So really the vase is this big. It just sits right in your palm of your hand like that. And I was working at a school. I was doing this beadwork. I was really trying to burn the candle at both ends, waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning, work until 7, come home, work from 6:30, maybe to midnight in a smaller room trying to do the beadwork. But it was worth it. It was worth it not because of the end product, but during the process of it all, I learned one, that you have to be very particular on the quality of your supplies and things that you use. If you try to bypass and make, go detours and try to make things easier, it doesn't often work. And you have to be okay with that. And that's part of the learning. And I think a lot of times I spent more time getting it wrong than I have been getting it right. But once you get it right and you know how that system works, it's easy to mimic, provided you're in the right headspace. Because you could follow every step, but if you're not there with your work, it is going to fall sometimes. You're maybe working with something and all of a sudden you're like, you might have whatever is going on. Because I think a lot like, you put your best work, you put your good mind into what it is you're doing. And if you come there and you're like all angry and strings break and needles break, and it's not a good thing. But so the process of doing all of this for this piece on the left was daunting. It was worth it. It won first place at the Santa Fe Indian Market when I did submit it. So it all worked out how it was supposed to. And then it is based on this here. Not necessarily this piece, but the idea that here you can see these line work in this old Haudenosaunee pottery. And so I tried to mimic line work here. It's not based on this one. This is the image I found on Google. Just because I thought I should give you an image to show you what it was that I was trying to create on this piece. And then this piece here on this side was the original 6-sided piece. Now this looks like it's 4 sides rather than 6. And what happened was I got all 6 sides beaded. I put it together. And because of the shape of the panels, it was about this big. So it went like this. Yes, laugh. It was hilarious. And I thought, oh my God, what am I going to do? All that hard work. And I only got a month to the show. How am I going to do this? And I just took those 2 sides, again, rethinking, okay, nothing always goes to as planned. I'm going to put those 2 things on the side, and I'm just going to do the 4-sided vase. And it came out really nice like this. I really didn't think necessarily about the proportion. I've learned a big lesson to make my, even on that one, I think it's too wide. It should be a little bit more narrow, but that's okay. And I really tried to do the line work and the geometric shaping, but I wanted to use a different color other than white. So I used blue. And this was supporting each other in creation. It was during the Wet'suwet'en. So it kind of all tied in. The blue water and the people, the women and the men holding hands, and then the women. So it all kind of tied in together. And I really tried to use a lot of precious stone here. Like you can see like here, not so much. It's just maybe like seed beads. But here I'm using more like there's garnet, 24 karat gold, turquoise, and different things. So I'm adding more precious stones and different things into my work because I think like, you know, you have to elevate yourself. You got to spend a little extra money to make money sometimes. This is something that I always gravitate to because I know how. For a long time, I've done a lot of moccasins, and unfortunately, some of them, sometimes now my hands hurt too much because of the leather work, so I don't do them as often, and these are all commission pieces minus this one. This was one of the first styles of moccasins I learned how to do. Ista Merit, or Merit Cross, is a master beadworker in her own right. And when she came to the group, what she did is she taught what her mother-in-law taught, what was Sioux style moccasins. And it was very flat and geometric shape, kind of like the edging here, but it was more linear and whatnot. And so what I did is, this one must have been 24, maybe 10 years ago, I think I made these moccasins. And I just added, instead of putting the lines of delica beads here, I just incorporated some raised beadwork there. Just to give it a different spin. But people were doing that before me too, so, you know, but that's that style, is a Sioux style. And then here, I was commissioned to do a pair of moccasins for brothers, a younger brother and an older brother, and they wanted something to be kind of similar but different, so that's what I made. I often do graduation pieces for for young adults usually who are graduating from high school, and that was a pair of moccasins that I made for a graduate. I was commissioned to do this pair, and I added this pair just because it was more youthful looking and not necessarily what I would tend to do, because I don't personally like to use purple. A lot of people do like to use purple when they're doing beadwork. For myself, I don't really. I don't, so I just wanted to add that one because it was a little bit more style, more like a high top style. You'll see here there's like a high top style, but this was like kind of when I first started to do high top rather than just like a slipper. So that's that. And then this one was out of my wheelhouse altogether. These moccasins actually were the last piece of the outfit. There was a woman who had commissioned me to make a pair of moccasins that matched what she had already worked on. Now, if anybody's asked to do commissions, a lot of times what you have to do is you have to do what the person asks for. You don't really have a lot of leeway sometimes, and it kind of makes you put in this little box that you might sometimes want to just break out of and you don't feel comfortable. That's what I felt like with these moccasins. I don't necessarily use pink, especially like that baby pink kind of, or that, I think they call it Cheyenne pink, or I can't remember what it was, but that pink there on the outline, whoops. Oh, the pink right here, I don't use that. And I would normally not use vibrant green, but that was given. And you know what? The client who picked the colors was a genius because the colors she picked were wonderful, but I would have never done that ever because that's not where I gravitate to. I'm more of the earthy tone kind of gal, or maybe the monochromatic white or different colors like that. Or black, just all black, various shades of black. That's where I'm kind of going nowadays. And I was very happy to have finished those pair of moccasins, but more I was just happy that I was able to really challenge myself and not try to fight her choices. Because really, that was for her and her granddaughter. So I was glad I made those pair. This is just like an inspiration thing that I have. I always take pictures where I am, just so that, you know, I can always look back and see like some of the things, like I want to one day do a thistle. And here's some wild looking, old fashioned wallpaper. And this are my treasures. When I was younger, my mother and my dad would go on trips and they would collect different things for me, and I would just keep them and put them on display. And of course, as I got older and I moved, I put them in a shoebox. And these are all my treasures. So there's like a wedding vase here, a small one, things from Maine, pottery, little figurines and different things, and a coveted Indian in the cupboard plastic key is inside that box. And that is very telling because when that movie came out, I'm not sure if anybody in here even was alive. Well, there are people who are alive during the Indian in the cupboard. When it came out, and of course it came out in VHS. We all know what VHS is, right? So it came in a box. And inside that box was a movie. There was a figure, you know, the little Indian in the cupboard man, he was in there. And there was a key. And there was a little bit of a fight of who was going to get that key. But I snatched it. And I put it in that box because my brother wanted that key too, but I was the one who got it. So that's in there too. This is the phase that, the series of things that I did during the pandemic. And there was a mask that I beaded, and it was acquired by a museum in the United States. And it also was part of the, what was it called now? First American magazine, I believe it was. They had a call out for people to send in various masks that were created out of different things. Some were like Haida masks carved out of wood. Some were woven masks and different things. And so that's the one that I created, and I sent that in. Then you have that monochromatic frame that I was talking about earlier. I also did a bracelet, which I now tend to do a lot because it's very popular, and it's something that can be done quicker, and I can really play around with different colors, and it doesn't take as long as most things that I bead. And that's the one thing, like, you know, when you're trying to establish yourself as an artist, people don't understand, especially for my art form, just how long it takes to create a piece like this. And so what happens is, like, you're living on nothing while you're waiting, and you're waiting for somebody to buy these different things. And so just to take that into account, and, like, you know, making sure that if anybody here is planning on selling their pieces, don't be afraid to ask for a deposit. You know, a lot of people think, well, no, I'm not gonna, because I'm just starting out. You're starting out, you gotta buy supplies, you gotta do these other things, you gotta pay bills. And so people have to know that this is your art form, this is your livelihood. You need to treat it you need to treat it like that, because if you don't treat it like that, nobody will treat it like that. Because somebody will just say, hey, just bead this for me, okay? I'll be back in 3 months. And you don't know, I'll take 20% down now, and I will, then that's how it works, you know? And don't be afraid if they say, you know what, I don't want it. Just say, well, I'm keeping the deposit. And you sell it to somebody else. And that's how it works. Like, that's how sometimes artists have to work. You have to be confident in yourself and know that your piece and your time, because it's time, and your knowledge and your creativity is valuable. And a lot of times we forget about that because some people just think, well, just art. No, it's not. It's time, it's life, it's blood, sweat, and tears, literally blood on my fingertips from sometimes doing this. And then I also did a clutch here that was part of an auction for the Santa Fe Indian Market. So there's that. Okay, this is the best. This is what I call some of my best work. And it's some of my best work because it's really the projects that I do that have no hold, no bounds. No one is asking me to make them. It's just my creativity. I can flow and do whatever it is that I want. And usually that happens when I go to the shows, because everything when I bring to the show or submit for the show, it has to be able to be sold. So this does not usually belong to anybody until I sell it there. Or sell it online. Sell your stuff online. There's a market everywhere. So this is a bag I did. It's called Saucy. And I really love the color yellow, like that mustard yellow, so I really incorporated there. And that's normally something that I wouldn't do. I would add these sequins around. Because sometimes I'm like kind of particular and I don't necessarily know how something's gonna look. Although people can execute it really well on other things, sometimes like you have to try different materials, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Luckily it worked here. This is a medallion, the first medallion that I ever made, and it was a trade with a fellow artist who gifted me a Hopi pot, and I had asked him, well, what would you like? Like, do you want money for it or whatnot? He said, let's do a trade-in. He wanted a medallion. And what I like about this one is I've never added like a geometric circle in the back of it. It kind of just elevates it a little bit. And I like that linear line there. It just kind of changed it just from it just being the flowers and stuff like that. So that was, I had gifted him that. And then this purse, does anybody know what it looks like? Go ahead. Yeah. So this is a purse I made, and it wasn't intentional, but then when I saw it, I'm like, oh my God, that is creation. So that is a purse that I made for in 2021, I believe it was, and I sold that at the Santa Fe Indian Market. And it was different because I had never incorporated like a band of beads like this. So I tried something different. This was a bag that I made for last year's Indian Market, which just sold this summer, thankfully. It is it's sold in the spring, but it is all made out of 24 karat gold. All the beads that are there are 24 karat gold lined, 24 karat gold plated, and then subsequently all the like clear are just crystal beads and different crystals and stuff like that. So that was a piece I called, what was it? Something about opulence. Elegantly opulence or something like that. I can't remember the name now because that's one of the downfalls of my art is once it's done, like I said, I kind of forget about it and kind of move on because I don't like to stay stagnant in one place because I try not to mimic and duplicate anything that I make. Everything is kind of is custom and one of a kind, even if it's not custom for somebody. It's just I try to not mimic the same design. Of course, I'm mimicking like the leaves and the flowers and different things but the actual design I don't. So that is the bag I made. And this was the medallion I made for this year's Santa Fe Indian Market. And I really like it because that was one of the original sides to the vase that I made that was this big. So the medallion is about that big. And I incorporated turquoise in the strap, in the necklace part of it here, and different crystals and whatnot. And it's really like more, what I like now is more the muted kind of colors rather than really the bright colors. So you can see kind of like how I'm taking a little bit of a journey. This was a piece that a client commissioned for her granddaughter, for the birth of her granddaughter. It was a cradle board wrap. So anybody know what a cradle board is? So it's a cradle board, and so you would secure and attach your baby to the cradle board, and then sometimes they would have a beaded adorned cradle board wrap. And so this is a wrap that she had commissioned. Now, when she commissioned it, she said, I want lots of beadwork. Now, this piece is about 6 inches by 12. So that is a big piece. It's like it's basically a blank canvas, a blank piece of hide. And I chose to use hide because I never used hide before to do raised beadwork on. And I wanted it to be different. And she was Deer Clan. And so I thought, you know what, let me try that. And so I did some like my geometric things that I like to do, lines. For me, a way to bring in a piece is to fill it up with more lines. Do rope stitch or different styles of stitches on the sides there. So I tried to use like crystal small beads and then, not crystal, clear beads and then white, just to kind of like make it so that it stands out, but not necessarily you're not drawn to the edge. Sometimes like this piece here, sometimes I use a contrasting color, and then sometimes like your eye really like just only sees the outline of it all, and you don't necessarily see all of what's going on in the middle. And I'm pretty good at doing flowers. It's my wheelhouse, binary, different things like that, leaves, foliage, all that kind of stuff. That's really kind of where I live and reside. Birds, no. Anything that's living and can move, I am not really good. I don't do animals. You see the footprints on the bottom there. That's really as far as I go in terms of animals, walking animals, aside from humans, if you want to call them animals. But so I had to really test out how I was going to do the bird. So I had to do some prototypes. And so there's the one on the top there, has no wings. So I knew that wasn't going to be a good one. And then the second one, it has a really strange looking beak, and I didn't really like that. But I tried to play around with different colors just to add more dimension. And then you can see there's more like an accent here, and it looks kind of wonky and whatnot. This is, would be, I think it's this one here. So this is how it ended up looking. it took me a while, and luckily with hide, compared to my normal or my usual standby velvet, when you're working on the hide, you don't see the impression. On the velvet, you see the impression. So when you're working, you have to be very intentional, and you have to work within the confines of what you've already did if you want to change what it is that you were working on. It either has to be bigger, it can never be smaller, because once you make that stitch, it indents, and then you just have messy looking work. I think anyway, work that I would not want to make sure that I did. And hopefully I'm not offending any of the beadworkers listening in the room or any of the beadworkers listening online, but that's just my personal preference. So with working with hide, you don't see all those little needle holes. So I like this bird better than this one. And this might have been my second one, or my first one. Because usually what happens is when you make something, you always get, which is a learning, you get better after as time goes on. So that was a commission piece that was from 2021, I believe. This is my father, the late Donald Mahkewa Jr. And I put him on there because this is a journey. Like I said, it was a rough go. We didn't always have the stablest relationship. He was a Vietnam vet, which was a result of was one of the catalysts to the reason why our relationship wasn't really stable. But when I was pregnant with my son, I made a point with my mother, and we went down to visit him, to see him and establish a relationship. And I put him on here not just because he's my father, but because when I would show anywhere in the Southwest, he would go. He would make an intention to go and visit. And I'd see my mom and him laughing and talking about different things. And it was just a really nice thing for him to come and to support me and just to be there. And him and his wife were potters too, and they would show at the shows too. So he had knowledge about things like that I didn't necessarily have knowledge about before. And so when he passed away, my son and I went to the funeral. And when we left the funeral, we were making our way to Flagstaff, and my son, I said, we're gonna go to the Grand Canyon. So we were racing and driving to get to the Grand Canyon before it was dark. And let me tell you, it was cold there. Cold compared to how it was in Phoenix. And this is the picture that my son took of me. And so that's me at the Grand Canyon. And when I went home, I was in a bead funk. That, you know, sometimes you just don't feel like creating, you're not in the right headspace. I was still grieving for my father. But after I got out of that space, I created and started this bag. And this bag was created based on the colors that I saw at the Grand Canyon. And what I ended up calling it was I heard it through the canyon. Now, that title has two meanings. My father died in January 2022. Does anybody know what else was happening during the early January 2022? Anybody know? Somebody said it was my birthday.
Are you talking about the insurrection?
No, it wasn't that. There was a lot of shit going down, so it might be. No, if you want to look at it that way. But what was going on was, do you know what it was?
Is that when they found
No, this is a little bit more pop culture. So what was going on was, it was a Johnny Depp and Amber Heard case. And that is what I watched, because I like to watch mindless TV or mindless movies when I'm beading. I like to do things like that, or I like to listen to music that I know all the words to. Nothing new, because if you're watching something that is new to you, you have to be concentrating on that thing. I tried to bead during the Game of Thrones. First season, couldn't do it. Subsequent seasons, I could, because I could understand and know who was talking. I didn't necessarily have to watch, but I could not be during the first season of Game of Thrones. I had to get used to that program. But I beaded that purse during that time while watching and listening to that court case, and so that's why it's heard it through the canyon. So it's heard through the canyon and the heard. So that was just a little funny thing. And the woman who bought that piece also watched that court case, so it was just something that was just funny. So when I gained my confidence as a beadwork artist, not necessarily just to go to shows, but to change my style in beading a little bit more, things started to come to me. The law of attraction. And what happened was my friend here, Kanien'kehá, Margaret Stand Up, is also a beadworker within Kahnawake, and she does raised beadwork along with painting and different art forms like that. I had an idea a few years ago to do a beading podcast. Because, you know, we're at the beading table, we're talking, or you're talking with friends, and it's just like random conversation, but it has to do with the beadwork and different things that we might have noticed and whatnot. And I said, hey, let's do a podcast, just like off the fly, like, you know, no big deal. Somebody within the community, I think we were talking about it, and she was talking about somebody said, hey, I have a newspaper. I can sponsor this podcast. Okay, let's try it. So we started in last year. So we're going to be taping next week, and I think it's our 14th episode. We tape once a month. Not 14th. It's got to be more than that. Maybe about 19th episode, maybe now. And it's called The Beading Table, and we dish about beadwork community, some of the scandalous things about copying, maybe pricing, different things like that. Just it's a real fun thing to do, just to have fun and to talk about different issues, and people write in, and we just have a really good time. And so that's what we did. Then sometimes you meet people and sometimes you don't meet people. Sometimes your beadwork does the meeting for you, or your art does the meeting for you. It is the platform on which somebody can seek you out. And thankfully for social media, a lot of people can have access to, for the good and the bad, but hopefully the good as an artist. And there's a famous artist, Jamie Okuma, who is a famous beadwork artist. Her mother is a beadwork artist also, and she is a fashion designer. And she was doing the curation of the art, the key art for the Rutherford Falls season 2. And so she reached out to me through Instagram, and of course I thought, this is not true. That's not the right person. Not Instagram, she texted me. And I thought, who is this? So I had to check the number. I yellow paged that number and I found out it was her. And so I texted her back and said, hi, you know. And I'm a very shy person to meet what I call my heroes, my beadwork heroes. And so she said, hey, you know, I'm doing this art. I'm curating this art, and we're interested. We want to put some raised beadwork in. So from one of my vases, she took this piece here, which they changed, just this little arch here. They changed the color. They can like manipulate and do all that kind of stuff, things I can't do. And then they also took this piece here too. And so that was part of the artwork for the Rutherford Falls second series. So that was like on a bus. It was in Times Square. It was just like, I was living the dream, because I never thought that my artwork would take me that far, or be even recognized by somebody who I thought was an upstanding, awesome beadworker who really like pushed the boundaries, beading shoes and different stuff like that. If you ever see those beaded Louboutins, that's Jamie's work. So, and her work is these pieces, and I believe all the back were here too. And I was featured in Native American Art magazine this spring for the issue, and I had a 4-page spread. I couldn't believe it. Another beadwork icon, Jessa Ray, Growing Thunder, comes from a long line of beaders, exceptional beadworkers. And she happened to be talking to somebody at the magazine and said, maybe this is somebody you want to put in the issue. And lo and behold, that's what happened. And I got an opportunity to meet them both this summer. I wanted to meet Jamie last summer, but I got starstruck and I didn't want to say hello. So this year I went and I said hello, and we hugged, and we just talked very briefly because she's a very busy woman. And Jessa Ray, I went and I really thanked her and went to see her, and she was there with her grandmother and her daughter. And I just like, you know, made myself known, because I realized like I have to do that. I can't just sit in my little bubble. You know, I gotta kind of work the room, or I gotta make connections. You know, I really have to pay homage to those people that are really putting their neck out for me, or even if it's just a happen to be like, oh yeah, this person's really good. That's something. So I went and I was able to meet up with her at the Santa Fe Indian Market, and then she went and she took me around to see some other excellent beadwork artists. And I made a fool of myself, I'm sure, talking to these people. but I talked to them and I was able to see some mentors, and it was really good, and it really was a humbling experience. And if you have a chance to thank those people who are giving you inspiration or things that you admire, then I would say, like, you know, don't be shy like me and wait like 4 years to finally say something. And this is my family, and this is the end of my talk. I just wanted to put them up there for the last time, just because they are really, they really take a lot. When you're an artist, sometimes it can be isolating. Oftentimes, I don't do the dishes because my fingers will get crinkly and not calloused, because if you're washing dishes and it really gets soft, and so it doesn't work. And sometimes other people in my household are picking up the load, or have to live amongst dirty dishes or different things like that. Or sometimes like meals are prepared, and my husband really takes on a lot of the work right now as he's home helping to take care of the kids while I'm here doing this residency. And they're just very patient with me and my craziness and my last minute procrastination and all that stuff that goes on, because motherhood is really the primary. Being a good person, taking care of your kids, making sure your family is taken care of, and also just being a good person. Beadwork is secondary. It's my passion, but it has to be secondary. And oftentimes they allow me to make those beadwork creations my priority. And that really does take a lot, and sometimes they might feel overburdened, but I'm just thankful, and I wanted to share my last slide of them, because they really are really kind of where it started. So thank you for listening to my talk, and if anybody has any questions.
Thank you, Leith. That was really wonderful. We're just going to do it a little bit differently. If you have a question, I'm going to ask you to raise your hand, and then I'll bring this so that you can speak into it so the audience can hear. Perfect. This is perfect.
You mentioned that your paternal grandmother, I think, had her signature was a butterfly or a moth.
Yeah.
Do you think that your signature would be the little people, like that you always put in the corner, or do you have a signature?
That could probably be maybe a signature, because like I said, I do little people. I don't put little people on everything. I usually just sign my name. I sign my name as my signature, but that's a really good observation. I might have to remember that one. Ma, remember that.
Sorry, I had a second question.
Sure.
Also, when you're doing your beadwork, do you sort of, when it's like non-commissioned and you're just working, do
Yeah.
you plan it out fully and like do a sketch of your work fully, or do you just go as you're going and like?
No,
recap as you go?
unfortunately, I can't just go as I'm going. Everything is designed right away. Just because that's easier for me. My friend Margaret, who I do the podcast with, she often does free flow, and she sometimes just maybe has one thing drawn, but for myself, I'm not an artist by nature. Like I have no training in that regard. I don't really know how to draw unless like it's a very time-consuming process for me to make my designs and whatnot. I have to be very particular and stuff like that. So I have to have a design, and usually it's on the back side of my piece. Some people put the design on the front side. I use it on the back side. So yeah.
I also have two questions.
Okay.
One of them is in the pieces that you showed that you did during the pandemic, they all had a red theme. I was
Yes.
just wondering if there was a reason for that.
The first piece that was the one that was a mask, I chose the red beads because at that time it was, everyone was in the same predicament. Our blood is all red. So that's the reason why I chose that. And I don't know necessarily why I chose red for the ones. I just thought that was a color. I don't normally wear red, and I would love to wear red, and I don't feel really confident in red, but I think that's where I let it show. And I didn't have to worry. Like I said, it wasn't commissioned, so I could just do what I wanted. So.
Yeah, I really love the red frame especially. And my second question is the beading groups that you mentioned.
Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify, were they also Indigenous artists? Or
Yeah, they're all Indigenous artists. Yeah.
were they from the same tribe as well?
Yes, they're all
Or
from
various.
Kahnawake.
Cool.
They all lived in Kahnawake. Some of them were Onondaga, but yeah.
Very
yeah.
cool. Thank you.
No problem.
Out of curiosity, if you don't mind answering, how much did the gold purse that you made sell for? If you can remember.
A few thousand.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
that's insane. How much does like most of your work sell for? Like if you could average it?
Thousands.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very well worth it then.
Thank you.
questions? Yeah, of course.
I'm just wondering, with the time that you have now for the residency, are you trying different things? Like, is there research involved? How does that process change, like with this opportunity?
Okay, so this opportunity, I will be focusing on beadwork along with another project. It's a project that I've had for 12 years in my mind, an idea. And over that time, I haven't really had the time to sit with the idea just because life is getting in the way, and that was just a wishful project. The foundation was set, and thankfully before I got here, I had the time to design what I was gonna do. And when I got here and I saw the dimension, I had to redesign everything again. And in terms of the research part of it, I am doing more hands-on research, talking to people who are masters in the field that I want to work in and who work with raw materials like wood. And it just seems like a lot of the people that I'm engaging with happen to have an element that really relates to my project. And so I thought I would be coming here and really getting going and starting to bead right away. And it took me a whole month. It took me a month. I didn't bead for a month, really, because what happens when you have the opportunity to do anything for a long period of time that you're not used to, the transition from how your life was to what it's going to be is very difficult. And I didn't think of that. And it's very similar to when I homeschooled my children. I took them out of school. I thought, we're going to be learning and we're going to have fun. It took them at least 2 weeks, and it took myself at least 2 weeks to get accustomed to being around each other, to not being in the school and different things like that. So it took me a while, a good 3 weeks, to one, get my space ready, make connections, and thankfully everyone in the visual arts department has been so welcoming and helpful, and just meeting different people who I can maybe call upon to help me do that project. So I'm hopefully going to be starting after Thanksgiving, so yeah.
One final question over here. Josh. Sorry, don't mind me walking. Zoom questions. Me? Okay. This one. So some questions just from Zoom.
Yeah.
Do you create your floral patterns by looking at real flowers?
I use it as inspiration. Like I said, I don't necessarily know how to draw that meticulous. But yes, they're based on either patterns I've seen in creation or patterns that I've seen in other books or patterns that people have gifted to me or shared with me. So yeah.
That was a question from Hillary. And then one more from Kira. How do you recommend people get started in beading and what kind of projects?
Some people would say like try to do a small project, not necessarily small in size, because sometimes the smallest project that you can do really is very meticulous and sometimes it's kind of cumbersome. A lot of people like to do maybe a picture frame. That's a good way to start a project because it gives you an opportunity to do different things. It gives you the opportunity to do raised beadwork and edging, and it also teaches you some of the construction that you might need for some of the other projects that you might do. So I think a picture frame is a good way to start. I also think that maybe budding up with, becoming a buddy to somebody who is doing beadwork is a good way. Sometimes you can find things online. Really, it's, if you don't have a community, you have to create a community, or you have to, you know, be that person like, hi, can you help me maybe? But then also realizing that artists have time constraints too, and different people. So like really trying to be, create and not be dependent on those who might be your mentors, and really trying to step it up and just do your own thing is what I would say. But yeah, picture frames are a really good start.
Thank you. Any final questions? One final question over here, and then we'll, can you guys pass it down? Sorry.
Hi.
Hi.
I have 3 questions for
Okay.
you. My first one is there anywhere we can see your photos of all your work that you've done?
Instagram,
Instagram?
yeah, and it's
Okay.
just Leith Mahkewa.
Okay.
I'm not sure where, is my name even on my thing? Okay.
My second question is, you mentioned that moccasin making hurts,
Yeah.
like your fingers. Why is that?
Well, it hurt more before I changed from commercial tied hide to hand tied, hand tanned, traditional tanned hide, because commercial hide is a lot tougher. So pushing your needle through and the consistency of it all is very hard on your fingertips. So that's why it was hard. Hard now is because sometimes I feel like I have arthritis, and sometimes pushing it in too hard is, I don't want to, how can I say this? I want to be able to bead. And if I choose projects that really are cumbersome like that, it takes me a while to recuperate sometimes to do that. It's just harder on my fingers, that's all, just from the constant holding like that. Yeah, and a lot of artists, a lot of beadwork artists too suffer from carpal tunnel sometimes because they're holding, like depending on how you're holding your material, if you're holding it really hard because you're really trying, then that's another way that you can have injury. So a lot of people have carpal tunnel and some stuff like that, but yeah, so.
And my final question is, do you still work with velvet material? Because
Oh.
you said you mentioned like deer hide, right?
Yeah, so this was the deer hide one. I tend to normally use either cotton or satin velvet or different things like that. A lot of times we'll find is that if you use like what they call like the shiny velvet, like the satin or polyester, it's really hard to make clothing out of it because when you sew it, it shifts all over the place. And so people tend to use cotton velvet for more of like the wear of it. But I've used, so this one is like what they would do satin velvet, and it's because it's a small project, it's easy to work with. This one was just like, not calico, cotton velvet along with this one, but this one also was satin. But the thing too is like when I was talking about leaving the impression onto the velvet, depending on which velvet you use to, it will leave, depending on the pile of the velvet, because some are plush and some aren't plush. Sometimes if you're using small beads with plush velvet, it almost seems like the velvet is being sucked into the, it feels like the beads are being sucked into the velvet, so you can't really see them. So you want to use like a smaller plush. But also with the more satin, because you lay your beadwork on it, it makes it fall down. So it changes even the color. Like even if you pressed on like the satin velvet too hard, it leaves that indentation. So you have to be very careful. So that's one of the things that have to be very mindful of. Even if you put your needle in a spot and you let your thread lie on the piece, sometimes you can leave a line of the thread. And a lot of times what I did is I'd say, no, sorry, you can't touch my work, like when I would be at a show. But people really want to touch beadwork. My mom wants to touch everything. And the beads, people want to touch the beads and shake the beads. And I do the same thing. And I didn't want people to touch them. You know, I was very particular. But people who want to buy want to feel. So you have to take the good with the bad, and you just have to be like, very polite, and they have to know the boundary of that too. But yeah, so it really depends on which one you're using, some of the pros and the cons, but I use them both. Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Leith, for sharing your work with us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you also, Sarah May, and to Ruth Skinner, Forest City Gallery, Greg, Josh, Jennifer, everybody for helping facilitate the live streaming that tonight too. So